9, what you're going to do as an individual assignment, okay? And because the 11 a.m. section had trouble with this and couldn't complete it during the section time, they appealed to me and I agreed that I've decided to extend the deadline to Monday at 10 a.m., okay? But it's still an individual assignment. Now, however, I'm going to be somewhat liberal on collaboration, meaning you can work together to help each other try and solve the assignment, but you still have to do the work yourself and turn in the file yourself. Can't use somebody else's file. No sharing of files. Okay? So again, this is going to be the assignment. It's under homework 9. It's going to be due Monday at 10 a.m. and it'll be discussed in class on Monday. So for Facebook, they had a July 25th earnings call. You can find it on EVT. You will need to find it on EVT. During this call, particularly when the CFO started speaking, he basically told the analysts that they were going to have a decline in revenue and guidance and a decline in margin in guidance, which caused the largest drop in U.S. history for any stock in a one-day period of time, wiped out about $100 billion of market cap the next day. So what I want you to do is a few steps. Step 1, I need you to do an as-is valuation of Facebook the day before the earnings announcement. As of July 24th, the earnings announcement was July 25th. Right? That's going to be a challenge to you because you're going to have to figure out using the Bloomberg tool how to get historical data to do your valuation. I'm going to give you a couple of tips here in just a second. Okay? Then you're going to have to read the earnings call transcript, and from the transcript in a separate Excel file, model out the drop in revenue relative to the earnings estimates at the time and the drop in profit relative to the earnings estimates at the time to look at the estimated impact on a pure DCF basis, incremental impact, just like we did with the iPhone. Then, step 3, put that incremental impact back into your as-is model, after the impact of that is put in. Then, compare the valuation in the model, the new valuation, lower, to what actually happened to Facebook when their stock price opened and plunged on July 26th, okay, the $100 billion or so drop. And basically what you're doing is you're trying to say, okay, you know, the model said theoretically, given this data, this should be the value. Here's the actual value we observed in the market. So if I were advising a client, would I tell them that this hasn't dropped enough? Like the stock's going to keep going down, that this dropped too much, or this drop was appropriate? Okay, so you're kind of comparing the theoretical value against what actually transactionally happened in the marketplace. But what this assignment is really about is problem solving and figuring out how to do something that's a little bit less standard and trying to get historical data out of Bloomberg. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So in order to do this, you can't use for Facebook today's EEO because we need the earnings estimates before the announcement. Okay, so here's where you're going to probably have to use the RV screen as a suggestion. In the RV screen, if you go to custom and you go to adding a column, one of the things that you might need to do is figure out what was the earnings estimate for sales for next year, but before, not today's earnings estimate for sales next year, but the earnings estimate for sales next year on July 24th, or at least before the earnings call. So if you go to best sales, and best, as we talked about earlier this semester, is Bloomberg estimate, which means it taps into the consensus estimate database. So let's go to best sales. And if we go to estimate revision, okay, you're now looking at the revised earnings estimates for best sales. And in this case, I want the forward year numbers. Okay, so I want to switch this to yearly. And so relative to the current year, right, or instead of percent change, I want to have a single value. And what I want to do is I want to offset this by 2 quarters. Okay. So here, or I could switch exact date. And actually, let's use exact date. Let's do this on July 24th, I believe. The call was on the 25th. So as of July 24th, the single value current year for best sales would be $56.84 billion. All right? So that's what I'm saying. You're going to have to kind of use a little creativity here and use the database to get some of this historical data. So you're going to have to repeat this for 3 years because you need the current year, you need the next year, and you need the year after that. Okay, because you need 3 years worth of sales. Yes?
How do you do it for the next year?
So again, if you go back in here, best sales estimate revision, what I could do is, let's look at forward 12 months. Or actually, let's look at blended forward. Blended forward 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. Current year, next year, year after. Okay? So that's what I'm saying. You might have to play around a couple of different ways to get the data that you want. Now, this isn't going to just be create one spreadsheet and export it. You might actually have to start writing some of these data things down. So that second file where you do the incremental changes, you might have to aggregate some of the data, as an example. All right, sorry, question?
So we're not using yearly, we're using blended forward.
Well, I'm thinking you might have to use blended forward only because for some of the years, because if you do the halfway through the year in the current year, blending the forward years, right? But nonetheless, that's the point. You guys got to figure this stuff out, right? Same thing. You're going to need an enterprise value as of that date. So here's another. So let me go back here, create a custom template. Let me not save this one. All right, sorry. Let me go to enterprise value. Now, when I go to enterprise value, I'll probably want to go to periodic enterprise value. I hate when Bloomberg makes my life miserable. Try this again. Enterprise value. Enter periodic enterprise value. I want the one on a customized period. I want one on an exact date. And by exact date, I want July 24th. So that would be the enterprise value of Facebook on July 24th. Matter of fact, if I did the EBIT, forward year 2 EBIT, based on the analyst revisions estimates, I might have to divide that enterprise value divided by that EBIT in order to get the forward EV to EBIT on that day. Okay, so you might have to manually do a couple of calculations here. All right, now also, as an example, you're going to need a WACC and a share count. Okay, so here's the thing, and you're going to need a stock price as well. So FA is historical data. And one of the things you can look up, again, custom, I'll do it here, is you can do, create custom, shares outstanding. Current shares outstanding, switch it to quarterly. This would have been the quarterly shares outstanding as of June 30th, 2398.61. Okay? So again, switching it to quarterly. Now remember, you don't want to put quarterly data in to your model, because our model is an annual model, but by using the quarterly data feature of Bloomberg, I can find out what the share count was pretty reasonably right before, based on the earnings announcement that day, right before the stock price crashed, because basically that's the share count that Wall Street would have been using approximately. It didn't change that much from the previous quarter as well. So essentially, yes?
If you look at just normal shares outstanding versus current shares outstanding, you get like 2 different answers.
I would use the current shares outstanding as of that date. Okay? Because I don't know what normal shares outstanding are, but just stick with the current shares outstanding. All right. So here's the other thing: is you might need a WACC. So one way you can get WACC, again, there's different ways to get at the data in Bloomberg, but I'll give you a simple one. So let's say you're on the WACC screen. If you were to click history, then these are the historical WACCs. And again, instead of annualized data, switch to quarterly data. Now you have quarterly WACCs. So again, same thing. Second quarter 2018, WACC 11.52%. Right? So that was essentially the June 30th WACC. Right? So you could probably use that reasonably. So as part of this exercise, like I said, you're going to have to go through the as-is and essentially create the data for your as-is. It's not going to be all in one clean, easy export like it was previously. So that's what I said. This is not a cookie cutter exercise, and I think it'll be useful because it kind of involves some problem solving, right, in order to do this. So that is the assignment. Okay, so what you're going to be turning in, basically 4 things. Number 1, you're going to turn in the as-is valuation before, as if you did it before the bad news came out. Okay, because it was a complete surprise. Nobody knew it was coming. So therefore, you're going to do it before. Then, looking at the earnings transcript, you're going to try and model out the change in sales and the change in EBITDA based on what the CFO said during the call, right? Because everybody was surprised by the lower guidance. So basically, you're going to model out what that lower guidance is, giving you, at least for the next 3 years, lower sales and lower EBITDAs, which you would have gotten by looking at the estimate revision forward numbers at the time. Okay. Finally, you'll go to that as is, save it, and then do sort of an after model where you basically put in those numbers and see what happens to the share price. And any other adjustments you think need to be made. And so that'll give you a theoretical value of what you think Facebook should be worth after those guidance numbers have been put in. Then just compare the change in share price between July 24th and July 26th, the day after the announcement, and basically see how close that is to the theoretical value. Okay? And then you do your little paragraph write-up that says, I think Facebook was, it was fair, it was not enough, it was too much, based on the theory. And again, this is more of, again, a process exercise, so we're all going to be hopefully reasonably close. If you got to make assumptions, you're going to have to probably make a few assumptions along the way, highlight what those assumptions are, right? So that way it's really clear to the TA that when they're grading this about what assumptions you had to make. But again, I'm not asking you to turn in your Bloomberg screenshots because, to be honest with you, it's going to be way too many. You're going to have to go to different parts and aggregate. So it's not like you're going to create one exportable file. Okay, so that's the point. You're going to probably have to start writing data down. Same thing. If I'm doing a forward year EV to EBIT in the second year, I'm probably going to do the EV of that day, and then I have to do the forward second year EBIT as of that day, and I'm going to divide manually, right? Because I don't know if Bloomberg will calculate that for me or not. So I might have to create the EV to EBIT multiple, right, based on that day. Yes, sir.
So if we use the WACC and the share count before and after the announcement, shouldn't we still get to like the same, like for the second as-is model?
Well, for the second as-is model, you're not going to change the WACC and you're not going to change the share count. The only thing you're really changing in the second model is the revenue drop that you're guessing based on the guidance and the EBITDA drop on the guidance. That's really what you're primarily changing. Okay. Now, if you think that after 3 years that influences the after 3 years, you'd have to change that too. Right? But nonetheless, you have to at least change the first 3 years in the model.
And those are like hard numbers that we're changing.
Those are hard numbers that you're going to, that's why you're doing it separate from the model, so that when you go back into the, so basically when you go back into the, let me open up a model, see if I have one here. When I do my valuation model for, well, here's IBM here, pulled up here. Doesn't matter what the numbers are, but if I go back here to my assumptions, these are what you're primarily going to change after your you do your incremental, because the incremental will help you get the change in the new sales. Now, obviously, this is not Facebook, so these aren't the right numbers, but in the new EBITDAs based on the guidance from the CFO. So but it's incremental. Remember, he's giving incremental guidance.
And we literally just change the date on the Bloomberg screen to see the change.
You have to make some changes on some of the Bloomberg RVs and FAs because you got to get historical data. So that's the other challenge, is trying to figure out how to get the data you need out of Bloomberg, right?
We back it up in the paragraph.
And back it up in the paragraph. So that way, if you have to do something crazy, make an assumption, you may have to. Then just at least we know how it's come about. Because like I said, this is closer to what you get to have to do in the real world. It's not as cookie cutter as what we've been doing this semester. You kind of have to make some messy stuff. So anyways, let's see what we come up with. So again, just one more time, today you can work collaboratively to help each other, coach yourselves through this, but you still can't share models. You have to do your own files and own submission for Monday's class.
Wait, you can't share what?
You can't share models. You have to create your own model. You have to create your own file. You have to create your own simple write-up. You can't share that. Okay, you have to individually submit. But you can help each other create the files, but you have to still do the files yourselves.
Do we need any screenshots?
No Bloomberg screenshots because there'd be way too many. All right. So again, if you are using a data point that you have a question about and you're drawing an assumption, write it out. Right. Put that into your submission when you're talking about whether or not it's fair. I had to use this data point because I'll just give you one example. Is that when you read the CFO's guidance, just as an example, he's going to guide the margin based on a range. He's going to say the range for our margin going forward is between these two numbers. So you're going to have to use an assumption of where in the range you think it should be. He's not just going to give you a number 16.2, right? So he's going to give you a range. So you're going to have to make some assumptions when you see range. Same things for tax rates. He's going to give the tax rate as a range. So you have to decide where in the range you're going to put your tax rate. So you will have to make some assumptions as you do this exercise. Yes?
For the data model, what should we do about that? Because won't that give us like the rest of the
Now, the data model will still be historical because we would always have only gone through the end of 2017. Because just change, I mean, you could change your period of year, but you want 6 years because they haven't done a full year yet. They're still in the quarters. So we still would use the same model today as we would 60 days ago. Okay? Yes?
I have a question about the sales blended payment again.
All right, hold on. What is today?
I'm gonna work on this tomorrow. It's fine.
Payment